All right, man, peace. So, brothers, I was sitting here just watching this ESPN segment featuring Mr. Andre Ward. We all know who he is, one of the most talented and most successful boxers of the last 15 years. He recently has transitioned over to commentating and also the promotional aspect of the boxing world. And he's being interviewed by Stephen A. Smith and Max Kellerman. He's going to attempt to establish the lay of the land in the 135-pound weight class because he was going to be commentating in the Vasily Lomachenko versus Luke Campbell fight. The conversation is, of course, going to transition into other top fighters, whether they be champions or contenders, both at the 130-pound weight class and the 135-pound weight class. Let's keep in mind that, once again, Andre Ward is an employee of ESPN, and he works very closely with Top Rank. And Top Rank has an issue with PBC and many of their top fighters. One of the top fighters at PBC, which of course is led by Al Heyman and Floyd Mayweather, is Gervonta Tank Davis. Vasily Lomachenko has recently stated that after his last performance against Luke Campbell, he's going to move back down to 130 and attempt to make a fight with Gervonta Davis. Let's pay very close attention to some of the things that Andre Ward states about Gervonta Davis. He sets parameters for him that are true. That Gervonta is a great fighter, but it's very difficult to establish how great he is because of the lack of great opposition he's faced thus far. Watch how Stephen A. Smith switches it on Andre and exposes one of the top fighters in the world, Terence Crawford, who I've always stated is number 2 on my pound-for-pound list because he has no big names on his resume. He has no big names on his resume. I don't care what people say. The biggest name that Terence has thus far is Gamboa, who was fighting at 135, way above his natural fight weight. I think that Gamboa might be fighting at 135 or 140 still because his body has filled out so much. But when he was in the ring against Terence Crawford, who was a very tall, lanky 135-pounder, I mean, if Terence had just kept him at the end of the jab, he could have made it an easy night. But Terence likes to slug it out, and he almost got knocked down a couple times. He was wobbled a couple times in that fight. That's the biggest name on his resume. To me, Terence's best win thus far was against Victor Postal. He seems to have trouble finding real fights in the welterweight division, and I blame him for it because, in my view, if he really wanted to fight those top welterweights over at the PBC, he would have left Top Rank and Bob Arum, but he didn't do so. Now he just wants to spend a lot of time on social media acting as if he's going to call those guys out from behind the fence, and it doesn't work that way. But once again, pay close attention to what Andre Ward says about Gervonta Tank Davis and how Stephen A. Smith switches it on him and establishes that same criteria for Terence Crawford. Of course, they're going to talk about it, and I'm going to chime in.
That being said, we have, obviously another title fight, or one other title, and Richard Comey getting ready to fight Teofimo Lopez.
That's going to be a great fight. One of the best fights that I've seen in the last 5 years was Richard Comey's fight against Robert Easter, maybe about 3-4 years ago. One of the fights of that year.
To see Lomachenko try to unify the 135-pound division. That being said, I would love to see Loma go down to 130 and deal with the likes of a Gervonta Davis, a Miguel Burchell, a Tevin Farmer, those types of people, a Jamel Herring. That's when I think that.
In other words, you want to see Vasily Lomachenko in the ring against slick black boxers. That's what you want to see. I understand what you're getting at, Andre Ward. My only issue with that is that you have to apply the same parameters to many other great fighters. Because if we were to look at Lomachenko's resume, just based on name recognition, he's beaten a lot of big-name fighters, guys like Nicholas Walters and Guillermo Rigondeaux, and made them look very bad. People claim that Rigondeaux was fighting at a weight that was above what he was accustomed to. Well, I have news for you. For boxers who are considered all-time great natural boxers, that weight issue was never supposed to be, or is never supposed to be, as impactful as it was for Rigondeaux that night, who looked like he was fighting in quicksand. Lomachenko made him look that bad. And he retired Nicholas Walters, who was viewed as this fighter who was just running through people, hammering guys.
Will be on the cake, and you'll be able to say once and for all that Lomachenko's an all-time great.
Dre, when you say those kind of people, but what we're really getting at is, and you and I are broadcast partners, you do the weigh-in on Max on Boxing, we host the fights together on ESPN, we worked on HBO ringside together. When we're in fighter meetings and a special fighter comes in, and Andre Ward comes in, I say, Dre, Who out there do you see that's like you when the dust settles? Who do you think's going to be there? I like Tevin Farmer a lot. Had him on the show like a lot of the fighters you just mentioned. But the dude who looks different is Tank Davis to me.
Tank does look different. I've compared him to Sugar Ray Robinson, and certain people might believe that that's me being hyperbolic. But when I look at the boxing skills and the one-punch knockout power in either hand, that's what he reminds me of, just a left-handed version. But I need to see him in there against other fighters who actually have skills to be able to determine how good he really is. And to be quite honest with you, every time that Lomachenko's name has been brought up, he gets very nervous, borderline frantic.
Agree. Is Tank the guy when Gervonta Davis, when the dust settles, is going to be the super fight opponent because he's just in the winner's bracket? Or is it someone else?
It's highly likely. I mean, that's probably the biggest name in that division. But here's the thing, or the issue that I have with Tank Davis, and I know they won't like this, but this is the truth. These are the facts.
When Andre Ward says they won't like this, he's talking about PBC. So you can expect Leonard Ellaby and or Floyd Mayweather to make certain cryptic statements about Andre Ward and or Shakur Stevenson, who is the fighter that Andre Ward is managing, who's also associated with Top Rank. Expect Leonard Ellaby and or Floyd Mayweather to make cryptic statements about either Andre Ward, Shakur Stevenson, or the both of them over these next few weeks because of this statement that Andre Ward's going to make about Gervonta Tank Davis.
We don't really know how good Tank Davis is based on the level of competition that he's fought. You can say that I'm old school, you can tag me with that, but you don't get to reinvent the wheel. If you want to be an all-time great, I'm not talking about Twitter followers. I'm not talking about Instagram followers. We need to see you up against another equal or somebody close to you, not the same looking type of guys, not regular guys, but guys that are real threats. Make those kind of fights and then beat those guys. And then you know what? Do it again and then do it again. Then you can start to feel like he's the guy in the division. Until that happens, Max, that's just on paper. Any one of those guys that I named at 130 has the opportunity to have a night against Lomachenko.
And I agree with everything that Andre Ward is saying here. But those parameters have to be established for every fighter. Don't tell me that Terence Crawford is without a doubt the #1 pound-for-pound fighter in the world, and we have yet to see him in a fight that we said, you know what? He's in there with someone who has all the skills that he has, the intangibles that he has, and also the physical presence, the athleticism that he has. Postal had the length. Postal had very good boxing skills, but he did not have non-real boxing skills similar to a Terence Crawford. And he did not have that great physical athleticism. We're going to get a lot of questions answered about Terence when we finally see him in the ring against Errol Spence. At least hopefully we get to see him in the ring against Errol Spence. I will say this. Terence tried to fight Manny Pacquiao, and supposedly the Pacquiao team turned it down. I'm pretty sure that they'll deny that. I would love to see that fight, though. Terence Crawford against Manny Pacquiao. That would be a dynamite fight.
And they'll do it, but they have the opportunity.
Dre and Max, that's why I asked the question, because the name that kept coming to my mind was Gervonta Davis, because I want to see that fight.
I knew that's where you were going, too.
That's exactly where I was going. But I want to ask you this. Is that fight, has Lomachenko been devoid of that kind of fight? Is it politics, or is there actually guys running from this dude because he's been so magnificent? I saw him make...
It's a little bit of both. Sometimes guys are running and they blame the politics. Gervonta Tank Davis has clearly had an issue with the specter of Lomachenko over the last 2 or 3 years, to the point where whenever Floyd Mayweather is upset with Gervonta, he threatens to force him to have to fight Lomachenko. So Floyd knows that Gervonta has an issue with the prospect of fighting Vasily Lomachenko.
Make a Nicholas Waters quit, for crying out loud. Quit! I couldn't believe it, but it happened.
I think it's a mixed bag. I think it's...
All-time great boxers are known for making great sluggers quit. It happens all the time. Ali did it to Liston.
I think it's a mixed bag. I think some guys are ducking Lomachenko, but I don't think Gervonta is. I think there's a line there. You know, he's on one side of the line, Lomachenko's on the other side of the line. But we gotta like figure out how to get that line out the way and allow these guys to meet. When are we gonna see these guys meet? When they're past their prime?
Well, we know that now the promotional companies are also aligned to networks, and the networks have no problem keeping all the fights in-house, because the market of boxers that are utilized now is vaster than ever before. Back in the 50s and 60s, it was for the most part the best American boxers. You had great boxers from overseas, Nino Benvenuti, and later on Carlos Monzon, you know, guys that came from Italy and Argentina, etc. You had great fighters from overseas before, but not quite to the level of now when it comes to the talent pool. The talent pool is so large that all of these promotional companies can establish in-house fights and just keep all the money to themselves. Why risk sending one of your great champions to lose his belt against a great champion from another promotional company / another network if you're not forced to have that happen? In order for these big fights to occur, both fighters have to want it to happen, both promotional companies and both networks. And it's very difficult to get all three of those factors to fall in line unless it's going to be a 9-figure payout like we saw with Mayweather-Pacquiao.
Gets beat. Let's do it now while both guys are on the rise and everybody's clamoring about the event. That's the type of fight we need to determine who the best is in the 130, 135 division.
Andre, you said you had Terence Crawford 1, Lomachenko 2. I agree, but I think it's very close. I think performance to performance, I'm judging who? Luke Campbell is credible enough for me. Like, you don't get to be a belt holder with a gold medal, and unless you can fight. If Lomachenko goes overseas to his backyard and lights him up, Dre, he could take the #1 spot potentially from Crawford to me. What say you?
I'm not sure I'm really ready to do that. I mean, Luke Campbell is definitely, he's a formidable opponent, and he's a threat. And again, Loma traveled to this fight. He's in the UK, and you have to consider that. But I don't know if a fight against Luke Campbell will cause me to put him atop Terence Crawford.
Of course not. I already have him atop Terence Crawford, so that's not going to be a factor. The issue for me with Terence, I'm waiting to put Terence #1, but he has to be the great fighter. If he were to defeat Kell Brook and Kell Brook were to look like something along the lines of what he was, say 6 years ago when he defeated Sean Porter for the welterweight title, that would go a long way for me, but that probably still would not be enough. I need to see Terence in the ring with somebody who could really fight and who's still competitive. I'm not quite sure what Kell Brook has left in the tank.
To see Terence Crawford's next fight, depending on who he fights and how he looks, to be able to make that determination.
By the way, before I let you get on out of here, since you brought up Terence Crawford, and I don't disagree with you or Max on that, I get it, but I want to know why y'all haven't mentioned Errol Spence Jr. and where y'all have him ranked right now in y'all pound-for-pound picture. Can y'all give it to me, please? 4. You? What about you, Dre?
I got him 4. I got Crawford 1, Lomachenko 2, Canelo 3, Spence 4.
What about...
Honestly, if we're just going to talk about skills as well as resume, you really have to put Canelo at #1. He's a guy who's fought Floyd Mayweather, Erislandy Lara when Lara was pretty much at his peak, fought Triple G twice. Like, Canelo he's fought a lot of big names. Danny Jacobs, he's fought great fighters. Canelo has not ducked anybody. I would love to see him get in the ring against Jamal Charlo. That'd be a great fight.
What about you, Dre?
Listen, Errol Spence, hence his nickname, is the truth. But again, I got to see him continue to fight guys like Sean Porter, eventually fight a Terence Crawford before I can give him that top 2, top 1, top 3 spot. Right now I got him somewhere around 6 and 7. And again, it's not because he don't have it. I just need to see him against better competition.
I understand that, Dre, but you haven't seen Terence Crawford fight those people either.
Thank you, sir. Thank you, Stephen A. Smith.
What you mean?
What you mean? What you mean? You heard what he said. What you mean?
Hey, when you talk, Terence Crawford went on the road. Terence Crawford went on the road and fought in the UK against Ricky Burns.
You gonna compare Ricky Burns to Kell Brook? Errol Spence went on the road. He went to the UK and beat Kell Brook in his hometown. Kell Brook was a greater fighter at welterweight than Ricky Burns was at 135.
At that time, he fought Yuriorkis Gamboa when Gamboa was undefeated.
I've never been up there and go back Gamboa.
No, sir. He fought Yuriorkis Gamboa when Gamboa was coming back from being suspended for whooping his wife's ass. And Gamboa was fighting at a weight class that was like 2 classes above where he normally was fighting at. So I give Terence Crawford credit for putting on a great showcase that night. That pretty much was Terence Crawford's introduction to the boxing consciousness for those of us who might not have been aware of him. He was considered a great prospect at that time. HBO, they pretty much invested a lot of stock in him. Bob Arum did, because he knew that he needed a great black fighter to diversify his market. You always need a great black fighter in your stable. So Terrence's conquering of Yuriorkis Gamboa was great for his career trajectory, but I'm not counting that as a great victory on his resume.
Those are good
But
wins.
listen,
Those are good wins. Ricky Burns got his decision before he fought.
But Terence Crawford cleaned out a division. Listen,
That's true. That's true.
Yeah, he deserves credit for that, but how many great fighters were at 140 when he cleaned them out? No disrespect. It's kind of like a Nonito Donaire type thing. Donaire, if I remember correctly, he also was undisputed at a particular weight class before he got his ass wazazaz up by Rigondeaux.
Gotcha.
Top to bottom. Andre,
Who has
appreciate
done that in
you.
recent history?
You.
Appreciate y'all. Thanks for having me.
He was ready to keep going. Look at Molly. Molly didn't even think about that. She just wanted to get in the ring with Andre Ward.
Usyk.
All right, enjoy your time across the pond. Still to come.
But anyway, that's basically it on that. This was a very good segment, and I like the fact that Stephen A. Smith brought up the lack of big names and really quality victories on Terence Crawford's resume, as great a fighter as he is. Anyone who watches Terence fight knows that if you just pay attention, he passes all the prerequisites for the eye test. He's a great fighter, but he does have to fight bigger names, especially at the welterweight weight class. I'm sure that that's going to happen, though. So peace.